The Empire Builder passes through some places you've heard of and probably some you haven't. So in addition to the big cities of Milwaukee, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Fargo, Spokane, and Grand Forks, you'll also visit places like Wenatchee, Cut Bank, Rugby, and Red Wing. Hi, I'm still Jeremy. Let's explore every single station on the Amtrak Empire Builder. Every stop along the Empire Builder has stuff to see, I'm sure of it. If you're like me, then every name on a map has some kind of allure, something mysterious and unknown. If you want to break up your journey and hop off the train along the way, here are some ideas. First of all, let me mention that if you type in Seattle on the Amtrak website, you'll see two options pop up. The one for trains is King Street Station. The other, Clipper Vacations Ferry Terminal, is just that, a ferry terminal about a mile away from the station. Similarly, typing in Portland, and ignoring the one in Maine, you get two options. Obviously, the train one is Union Station, not the Greyhound bus terminal. Chicago is easy, it's just Union Station. Now, looking at the various stations, we'll go eastward, first as if leaving Seattle. Edmonds, Washington is the first stop. It's an arts center, has a library on the National Register of Historic Places, and is the hometown of both Jeopardy champion Ken Jennings and traveler Rick Steves. Everett, Washington is home to several sports teams, 14 listings on the National Register of Historic Places, and to aerospace manufacturers Boeing, who built the largest building in the world by volume in Everett. It's the hometown of singer Kenny Loggins and of the footloose Glenn Beck, if you're into that sort of thing. Leavenworth, Washington is a popular tourist village with Bavarian architecture, lots of weekend festivals and events, and a view of nearby mountains. Amtrak trains stop at Icicle Station. Cleo Baldwin, inventor of the lap pool, came from Leavenworth. Wenatchee, Washington is the apple capital of the world and home to an art scene including several performing arts groups. It's known for its outdoor activities and is the hometown of Chris DeGarmo of the band Queensryche, if you're into that sort of thing. Ephrata, Washington was probably named by a railroad employee in the late 1800s and has an airport featured in the 1989 movie Always, which was Audrey Hepburn's final movie. Ephrata was the retirement town of Robert Preston, who in 1974 stole a helicopter and landed it on the White House lawn. Now, between Portland and Spokane. Vancouver, Washington is different than the Vancouver, but it's older. So there, Canada. There are lots of historical buildings and you can see the mighty Columbia River, which here is the border between Oregon and Washington. Willie Nelson got his start as a DJ in Vancouver, and before he was president and before it was part of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant was a soldier stationed here. Bingen-White Salmon Station is named after Bingen, Washington, where it's located, and White Salmon, a bigger town right next door. Both are on the Columbia River, and both are in, I've been looking forward to saying this, Klickitat County. Wishram, Washington was the site of Celilo Falls and, at 15,000 years old, the longest continually inhabited settlement in all of North America, until 1957 when a new dam flooded it. A bridge built across the Columbia River into Oregon in 1912 is still in use in Wishram. Pasco, Washington was named after a city in Peru and is unusual in that it receives very little rain throughout the year, unlike the rest of the Pacific Northwest. Famous people from Pasco include at least 3 World Series pitchers, Jeremy Bonderman, Bruce Keeson, and Ray Washburn, as well as Arthur Fletcher, who coined the phrase, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." Spokane, Washington is the first big city you visit after leaving your original station if you're going eastward. Among other things, Spokane is the home of Father's Day. There are dozens of historical sites and parks around Spokane, and all the usual stuff that big cities offer. Lots of famous people came from Spokane, like Bing Crosby, David Lynch, and Jess Ross Kelly, at one time the youngest American to successfully climb Mount Everest. If you came from Portland, you'll be stopped in Spokane a little over an hour. If you came from Seattle, the stop is a little over half an hour. Spokane is a so-called smoke stop, where you can step off the train and smoke, or just stretch your legs and get some fresh air outside. There are 6 such stops along Empire Builder, the same stations in either direction. At other stations, you generally aren't allowed off the train for a break. Sandpoint is the only stop that Empire Builder makes in Idaho, and it was once rated as the most beautiful small town in America. Sarah Palin was born in Sandpoint, and Ben Stein has a summer home there. It's famous for the lovely Lake Pend Oreille. Libby, Montana, in addition to being a town from which you can see some gorgeous mountains, is famous for at one time producing much of the world's vermiculite, used for fireproofing. Unfortunately, Libby's vermiculite contained asbestos and became a huge public health crisis. There's even a movie about it. Whitefish, Montana is home to some great food festivals, easy access to mountains and skiing, and places to pick your own huckleberries. Former Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer once operated a business in Whitefish. Whitefish is a 20-minute smoke stop. West Glacier, Montana is a little village, but the main point of it is that it's the western entrance to Glacier National Park. There are only a couple hundred permanent residents in West Glacier, but it does have its own post office. Amtrak doesn't actually enter the park, by the way, but goes along its southern boundary. Essex, Montana is another tiny unincorporated village just outside the boundaries of the national park. Amtrak trains only stop here if it's known that someone is getting on or off. It's around here that the views on the Empire Builder are especially captivating. If you're in the area, you can stay at the Isaac Walton Inn, built in 1939 by the railroad, or you can check out Goat Lick Overlook, if you're into that sort of thing. The train station in East Glacier, Montana is open spring, summer, and fall, but not winter. It lies at the eastern edge of Glacier National Park. Browning, Montana is only used by the Empire Builder in the winter, when East Glacier Station is closed. East Glacier or Browning is the last of the Rocky Mountain scenery if you're going east, or the beginning if you're going west, and if it's still light outside. An episode of X-Files took place in Browning. Cut Bank, Montana is just 30 miles south of the Canadian border, and there's a dramatic train trestle just outside of town. Two recent Miss Montana winners were sisters from Cut Bank, and the 2014 movie Cut Bank, as you might imagine, took place here. Shelby, Montana was named for a railroad executive, one Peter Shelby. Weather-wise, it sounds like quite a place. I love the way Wikipedia puts it. Quote, Shelby has 4 distinct seasons and is considered an arid climate. Long, severe winters give way to spring-like weather anywhere from March to May. Summers can be extremely dry and hot, although it is not unusual to experience a snow flurry in July. The area is prone to heat, lightning, hail, and severe thunderstorms during the summer months. Fall weather is often unpredictable, with snow falling during October some years and temperatures well into the 80s stretching until the end of November on other years. Due to the city's location just off the Rocky Mountain front, wind is constant. End quote. I bet there are some tough people in Shelby. The smoke stop at Shelby is about 5 minutes, sometimes longer. Havre, Montana is another railroad town, and there's even a statue of the Empire Builder James Hill himself outside the station. If you see purple squares on the sidewalks of Havre, those are skylights from an old underground mall that was full of brothels, opium dens, saloons, and illegal liquor smuggling operations during Prohibition. It's a tourist site now. Jeff Ament, the bass player for Pearl Jam, was born in Havre. Above ground, I think. The country's most famous rodeo clown, Flint Rasmussen, was also born in Havre. Like Shelby, Havre is also a smoke stop of 20 to 25 minutes or so. Malta, Montana was supposedly named when a railroad official spun a globe and randomly stuck his finger down in the Mediterranean Sea. Malta is important for dinosaur enthusiasts, since one of the best dinosaur fossils ever found, an intact Brachylophosaurus, was found nearby. You can see it in the Great Plains Dinosaur Museum in Malta. Glasgow, Montana was also named by railroad staff spinning a globe, this time their finger landing in Scotland. There's an airport on a ridge in Glasgow from which you can look out over Montana. Steve Reeves, who starred in movies like Hercules, as seen on Mystery Science Theater 3000, was born in Glasgow. See the link below for the whole video I did about Glasgow. Wolf Point, Montana is home to the granddaddy of Montana rodeos, the Wild Horse Stampede, which is held every July. You can also take a look at the Lewis and Clark Bridge just outside of town. It's now disused and on the National Register of Historic Places, and it spans the Missoula River. Wolf Point is the easternmost Amtrak station in Montana. Thanks to oil, Williston, North Dakota has seen a big increase in population and size. It was originally yet another railroad town. There are arts centers, outdoor activities, and museums in Williston. The Miss North Dakota pageant is headquartered here too. Stanley, North Dakota has also benefited from the oil boom. Its population has nearly doubled to about 2,800. Highway 8, which runs straight up through the state from South Dakota to Canada, goes through Stanley. Minot, North Dakota is a former railroad town and now big city nicknamed Little Chicago. The Mouse River, which starts and ends in Canada, flows down into the U.S. and right through Minot. Scandinavian culture is big in Minot, and you can take a look at the amazing Scandinavian Heritage Park. Boris Karloff worked as a baggage handler on the railway, and also performed in Minot before his movie career. Wiz Khalifa was born in Minot. The smoke stop in Minot lasts between 20 and 35 minutes depending on the direction you're going. Rugby, North Dakota was named after Rugby in England, which, yes, is where the sport originated. Rugby was founded as the junction of two train lines, and it's the geographic center of North America. Unofficially, anyway. As far as fun tourist things to see, close enough. I mean, they went to the trouble to put up this cool monument and all. Devil's Lake, North Dakota is named after the actual Devil's Lake, which is getting bigger due to increased rainfall and having no natural outlet. Devil's Lake is a good-sized town, and there are plenty of amenities if you're hanging around, like maybe checking out the lake. Grand Forks, North Dakota is another big city, at the fork of the Red River and the Red Lake River. The University of North Dakota is in Grand Forks. There's plenty of cultural stuff to do as well as parks and things. Dickie Peterson, bass player for the Great Blue Cheer, was born in Grand Forks. Also, Charles Lindbergh was too. Not that one, this Charles Lindbergh, one of the Marines who raised the famous first flag at Iwo Jima in World War II. Fargo is the biggest city in North Dakota and one of the coldest in the lower 48 states. It was named after a railroad executive, William Fargo of Wells Fargo. There are museums and sports venues and all sorts of things here. Roger Maris grew up in Fargo, and actress Christian Rudrud, who played William H. Macy's wife in the movie Fargo, was born here. Detroit Lakes is the first Empire Builder station eastbound in Minnesota. It has lots of sites on the National Register of Historic Places, including the Amtrak station itself. Besides the historic buildings and the music festivals, tourists often come to Detroit Lakes to see the lakes. Staples, Minnesota is a small town which started as a sawmill. It calls itself an active, progressive community at the heart of Minnesota. The charm of the town and the nearby lakes are some reasons to disembark in Staples. Between Staples and St. Cloud, the Empire Builder crosses the Mississippi River. Unfortunately, in either direction it'll be the middle of the night. St. Cloud, Minnesota is a big city full of grand old buildings, a university, and excellent parks. The Beaver Islands, a maze of islands in the Mississippi River in St. Cloud, is popular with kayakers. June Marlowe, who played the Little Rascals teacher Miss Crabtree, was born in St. Cloud. St. Paul Station is, of course, the gateway to the huge Twin Cities. The station itself is in St. Paul, the capital of Minnesota, and it's a grand old building. You could spend months in the cities and not see it all. Just know that Prince lived just to the west in Chanhassen. Plus Terry Gilliam and Dr. Demento. They were all born in Minneapolis. And MST was taped in the area. Good place. And this is a smoke stop lasting around 20 minutes. Red Wing, Minnesota is a small city on the border with Wisconsin, which is across the Mississippi River to the east. In 2008, Red Wing was recognized for its, quote, impressive architecture and enviable natural environment. If you've ever heard the song Walls of Red Wing by Bob Dylan, well, that was about a juvenile detention center in Red Wing. If that's not your thing, try the many music festivals in Red Wing. Winona, Minnesota is a small city and the final eastbound stop in Minnesota on the Empire Builder. It's known as the stained glass capital of America and is famous for Sugarloaf, a prominent rock pinnacle. By the way, the band Sugarloaf of the hit Green-Eyed Lady was named after a different Sugarloaf in Colorado. But actress Winona Ryder was born in and named after Winona, as was James Earl Fraser, who designed the Buffalo nickel. La Crosse, Wisconsin is where the Empire Builder finally crosses the Mississippi River in grand fashion via the La Crosse Rail Bridge. La Crosse is a big city and there are a ton of great old buildings, festivals, and things to do, like walk along the Mississippi and the Riverside Park. Tomah, Wisconsin is a small city whose Amtrak station is unstaffed. There's a nice lake and some parks, and I personally think the town itself looks like a really nice place to walk around and check out. The area around Tomah is hilly and forested, having avoided the flattening glaciation of the last ice age. Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin is a town near the famous Dells, an area of the Wisconsin River with unbelievable sandstone formations that you can tour by boat. The town of Wisconsin Dells features a lot of theme parks and things like that. For example, one is called Top Secret, an upside-down White House where even the rooms inside are upside down. Touristy, but kind of interesting. Portage is amid the grasslands of Wisconsin. It's a small city chock full of historical sites, shops, and restaurants. Portage is proud of its location, and its slogan is, "Where the North Begins." Naturalist John Muir grew up in Portage. Also, serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was killed in Portage while a prisoner in Columbia Correctional Institution. Cheerful stuff. Columbus, Wisconsin is another town on the Empire Builder with a lot of historic buildings on its wide, friendly streets. The Johnny Depp movie Public Enemies was partly filmed in Columbus. The town is about 30 miles from Madison, the capital of Wisconsin. Milwaukee, Wisconsin lies on Lake Michigan, as does Chicago, so this entire portion of your trip will be alongside the lake, although not right on the shore. Milwaukee is Wisconsin's largest city, and there are endless historical sites, festivals, parks, and other attractions. It's the hometown of tons of famous people like Al Jarreau, Liberace, Les Paul, and Gene Wilder. Not to mention Christopher Scarver, the guy who killed Jeffrey Dahmer back in Portage. And Dahmer himself was from Milwaukee, actually. Give me Gene Wilder any day. Glenview, Illinois is the first, or last, stop outside Chicago. Glenview is pretty big, but it's categorized as a village. There are parks and bicycle routes and lots of places to stroll around and check out the buildings and museums. Its oldest neighborhood is called The Park, and it was established as a home for followers of 18th century Christian writer Emanuel Swedenborg. And then there's the final station, some tiny little town called Chicago. There are 2 Major League Baseball teams in Chicago. As we all know, the best one is the one on the side. Whew, and after all that research, I wish I were sitting on the Empire Builder right now, in the observation car, having a beer and just watching the world drift slowly by. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos for travel tips, stories from my own travels, and my experiences as a Type 1 diabetic wanderer. See you on the rails.